Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Tom Watson. I'm the founder and CEO of AMI Asset Management International, based in Seattle. We've got some attendees rolling in here as we speak, so I'm just speaking slowly to let them get in for a minute. But we'll get going here in just a few more seconds. All right, we've got 30 minutes today, so I think I'm going to rock and roll. So I'm here to talk about measuring the value of hardware asset management, or HAM. We got to come up with a better name than HAM, but I haven't been able to think of one. But the first thing I wanted to do is just do a quick poll using the platform, the Pathable platform. There's a HAM tool question in there. What platform do you use for managing hardware assets? Just go ahead and select those. I'm going to be focused using ServiceNow today because we're pretty heavy in the ServiceNow platform, but what we're talking about isn't applicable to a specific platform. It's just the tool that I'm using to demonstrate some of the techniques that I'm talking about today, but I'm kind of curious on what tools you all are using there. So I'm just kind of clicking in here. I'm going to kind of show the results over time. We got 50-50 ServiceNow and SolarWinds, but go ahead and fill that out when you get a sec. I'd appreciate it. To kind of frame this, the first thing I like to discuss is the goals for asset management. They fall into these four categories: audit compliance, having to you're regulated or you're forced to manage hardware and you've got to produce audit reports, saving the spend on hardware assets, or the labor or maintenance and services contracts. There's a whole bunch of different ways to save money, but that's the primary category, a goal of asset management. Maintaining availability of assets so the business is able to operate efficiently. We want to save money, but we want to make sure the business has the assets that it needs available. And then more importantly these days is security. Understanding the hardware assets that are in your environment will enable you to more properly secure them. Now, the trick though is that how do we go ahead and measure the value of our performance against achieving these goals? And before we do that, we have to really self-assess our own maturity in hardware asset management. This is a scale that we use to kind of categorize where companies are, starting with just chaotic. There's no control, there's no asset database, there's just a lot of waste and really no kind of management system in place today. And then there's the reactive level where a lot of people start where they've got spreadsheets, or maybe they're using ServiceNow, but they've got multiple different tables or systems within there where they're managing hardware, where there's a lot of effort, a lot of redundancies and duplicated data, et cetera. And then producing reports or satisfying audits takes a lot of effort to pull data together. So elevating up from there, we get to a proactive level. And this is where, this was kind of the goal, sort of the finish line for hardware asset management for the kind of past 20 years of me doing this. This is where organizations achieve compliance by controlling their processes, automating workflows, barcode RFID stuff, or automating back-end integrations to really drive efficiency so that there's high accuracy in the asset database, and achieving compliance and producing reports is super fast and easy. So that's kind of where we've been in terms of like where the goal has been. But the challenge that most hardware asset managers, or a lot that we work with, find is how to prove the value. What's the ROI of hardware asset management? And that's where we want to start to move hardware asset managers into this strategic level. Kind of once you get your asset management processes and data under control, now we want to start to use analytics. Let's look at the history of our assets and timing information so that we can see trends, and then we can score our performance over time. And then we can turn that into actual value that we can demonstrate to leadership. So that's kind of what I'm talking about today, is how to score ourselves and to show our performance and prove that we're actually adding value to the organization over time. But I like this slide here because you can't just jump to the strategic level. You've got to work your way up this level of maturity because there's some foundational stuff that's required. Okay, excellent. So There's the chat control, by the way. You guys have been doing this for a day, so you know, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. Sometimes I forget. I do have one more poll before we get started. How would you rate your own hardware asset management maturity? If you look at these tags, if you will, you know, use this scale, how would you rate your own asset management maturity? This is all anonymous, by the way, so don't worry. Just be honest. I'm just curious. It's not important, but just something that we like to kind of understand and see if people kind of know where they fit in that maturity scale. Okay, and I'm going to go back real quick and see if I can take a look at those results so far. We've only got 2 people that did the ham platform thing. So, all right, but on the full screen results for the ham maturity rating, if I can figure out how to use this polling tool, come on now. All right. We've got reactive and proactive primarily. Makes sense. I appreciate that feedback there. Nobody's considered themselves strategic yet. So that's what we're going to be drilling into today. Okay, so I mentioned we've got to walk ourselves up that maturity scale, and just one of the core things that you have to do before you can get to that strategic level or start to capture analytics about your hardware processes to produce value is to control the asset lifecycle. That's that proactive stage where you establish consistent processes for updating assets as they move through that lifecycle. And ensuring that the processes, the technology, and all your people are properly trained on how to record asset updates through the life cycle. Only once you get that control of the asset life cycle can we insert the tooling that we need to produce the type of reports that I'm going to show you a bit later. But if you don't have control of the life cycle, you can't trust the analytics that you capture. So this is just the important first step that you know I like to I just like to drill into here, because it's like a prerequisite, if you will. Once you've got the asset lifecycle process controlled, then the next trick is just defining the scores. And by score, I mean the grades that you're going to use to measure your performance. And I didn't know what these were, and I'm not saying I have all the answers here, but I've gleaned some popular KPIs that some of the more mature hardware asset management organizations that I've worked with in the past have defined these KPIs that they use to manage to measure their performance. Those scores, just even identifying what the score should be is a challenge, I think, especially for newer hardware asset managers. So I'm going to share some of those. The categories of those, I just broke down into 3 categories. There's efficiencies, maybe productivity, but you know, efficiency of labor, utilization of assets, and then data accuracy. These are kind of the 3 categories that of KPIs, different areas that we're going to measure. And I'm going to kind of drill into one example of each type, and then kind of how to turn that into something that's valuable for the organization. This next slide here are common KPIs that, again, I gleaned these from pretty mature hardware asset managers. I didn't come up with these myself. I saw somebody building a dashboard once of these things, so I'm not taking credit for it. But I really I really appreciated seeing these KPIs as something that I could get my brain around in terms of measuring how are we managing assets through the life cycle. So you'll see these are broken into the different phases: acquisition, deployment, maintenance, and retirement. I'm going to kind of run through these quickly. On the acquisition side, that purpose mix is measuring when you acquire assets, are you acquiring those for special projects or for standard refresh? And the goal is to maximize standard refresh because you get the most value out of those assets. We find when big enterprises, or really when any organization buys assets for a specific project, they use it for that project and then those assets sit and they're parked. And the dream is we're always going to reuse those assets for other purposes, but it becomes difficult to. So we really want to have special acquisitions minimized. Delivery time is measuring our vendors' performance. Are they getting the stuff that we want quickly? If not, why not? Do we need a different vendor? Receiving accuracy is measuring the vendor's delivery accuracy as well as our own internal receiving teams. Are they quickly receiving? Are they receiving accurately? That leads to invoice reconciliation issues, as well as just improved delivery times. When we start to get those assets out of stock and in the hands of end users, we want to measure the stock dwell time. Assets that are sitting in stock are not delivering value to the organization. We want to measure how long things are sitting in there. They're eating maintenance, you're paying taxes on them, they're eating into warranty. We want to make sure that assets coming into stock are the first out, first in, first out. So measuring your stock dwell time over time becomes a key indicator for how well you're managing your stock levels. Installation time, our service teams delivering those assets when they're requested and getting them on users' desks. And then process errors, measuring how the accuracy of fulfillment, meaning are we giving the correct model asset to fulfill the order? Our assets, the requests have the correct location, the correct user information. Being able to capture the accuracy of the fulfillment of delivery orders becomes a key area to shine a light on bad processes. When we get into maintenance, where the assets are in their life cycle, in their in-use lifetime, we want to measure utilization. That's one I'm going to drill into here in terms of how to measure utilization, how to report on it over time, and then how to turn that into how to turn changes in utilization into specific value that you can demonstrate to the business. Utilization just means what percentage of the assets are in use versus all the stuff that we have. We want that to be as high as possible without impacting availability. When we get into these in-use off-network, this is measuring the compliance with ensuring all assets are discoverable. This is for security purposes and maintenance purposes. We want to make sure, and for process monitoring, we want to make sure that all in-use assets are being discovered on the network. And likewise, the reverse, any assets that we're discovering on the network that we can't link back to an in-use record, or any ghost assets we may be discovering on the network. We want to shine a light on those so we can get those to 100%, or in this case, 0%, so we don't have any exceptions with discoverability. Maintenance time is measuring our maintenance vendors' turnaround time. At the end of the life cycle, we're measuring the pre-disposal time to get assets out the door. Disposed assets are lingering, they pose a security risk. When we send those assets to the disposal vendor, let's measure their turnaround time to make sure that they're meeting their disposal SLAs. And then lastly, let's measure our documentation completeness. For every asset that's been disposed, we need to have proper documentation that relieves our responsibility for the asset. Let's measure that percentage over time. Okay, so there's more KPIs, I'm sure others, I would love to hear others on the chat here of other KPIs that you use to manage, to measure your performance in hardware asset management. There's a ton more, but this is a great place to get you started, I think. What I'm going to do now is drill into utilization and a couple others to sort of to show the technique that we employ to capture the data and then trend that data and then to turn it into value. So utilization, as I mentioned. All right, here, Victoria, you're sending in questions. What is the value of asset management? What are the benefits of hardware asset management? And what is the asset management life cycle? These are questions that are coming in through the chat, and I'm gonna touch on what's the value of asset management by showing a specific example here. So by utilization, we're talking about what percentage of the total assets that we own are in use. Like I said, any asset that's sitting in a stock room, sitting in a maintenance vendor, sitting in a pre-disposal dock is not providing value to the business. The business shouldn't have that asset. The only reason to carry stuff in stock is because you need on-hand inventory to fulfill break fix. I'm sure there's other reasons too, but you get the point. Like we want our stock levels to be as minimal as possible, like the old, but just-in-time manufacturing. We don't want things dwelling in stock, not delivering value. So the way to turn a utilization thing into value is to first score it. So we're going to talk about how do we score our utilization numbers, how do we then trend those and surface those trends to the business, And then how do we then calculate value based on that utilization score and utilization trend? So like I mentioned, we're pretty heavy in ServiceNow. This concept, it doesn't matter what tool you're using to implement these types of concepts, but I'm in the ServiceNow, so I'm kind of using that as an example. There's different tools within ServiceNow that you can use to score. Performance analytics is ServiceNow's KPI tracking scoring system. Very powerful, very, very big, pretty complex. There's also the Asset Track Scoreboard product, which is a lighter weight version. And that's what I've got kind of demonstrated on screen here. But the idea with to track utilization, we need to first establish a scoring system. So here we've generated or created a scoring, which is the percentage of in-use assets versus all assets. And if I just click on this guy, oops, I'll kind of take you to an example of what that looks like here. So I'm establishing how to calculate the score of utilization. So again, you can use performance analytics, use the Asset Track Scoreboard. You could home roll your own type of algorithm to calculate this. This roll-up job here is a percentage of in-use assets versus all assets. And what you can see I'm doing here is I'm clearing the hardware table and I'm counting all of the assets that are in in-use status. And I'm using that as my numerator. And then I'm going to divide that by the total number of assets using this alternate pool thing here. So I'm saying, let's take all the assets that are in use and let's divide them by all the assets. And I'm saying all in use, in transit, in stock, in maintenance, missing or build assets. I'm excluding retired, consumed, and on order assets. Even though they're in my system, they're not in my possession yet. So I'm saying, let's count all the assets that are in use over all the assets that I have, and that's going to come up with our percentage score, this percentage of alternate pool. And you can see my results here. This job runs every day, and it calculates and saves that score. So on a day-to-day basis, you can see I'm running at about 80% utilization. Here we dip to 79, et cetera. So again, it doesn't matter what tool you use. This is just a simple algorithm to count the number of in-use assets over the total number of assets to come up with a score, save it in a database somewhere in ServiceNow or outside of the platform or whatever your internal tool is. And now you've got your historical utilization data. So if we get back to then my presentation, then we can use whatever visualization tool we need to show that trend over time. This report here is just aggregating those scores on a monthly basis and averaging them. And I've got a couple of lines here to show my targets where, we want to make sure in this example, our utilization is over 75%. Those are just target numbers, but you can obviously set your own targets. But you'll see that this report is helping to visualize the trend of our utilization over time. And you can see it started to decline, which indicates that there's a problem. Why are our assets dwelling in stock, or are they failing? Or, it shines a light on a potential utilization problem. And then if we can show these trends increasing, and if we can demonstrate to our leadership that we've taken our average utilization from 75 to 80%, then you can take that to an ROI calculator, which would easily generate a specific hard dollar number that even like a simple-minded executive might understand. So this is just an example of an ROI tool here where if we have 25,000 assets and we're running at a 75% utilization, that means that 25% of our assets are not in use currently. If you drove that to 85%, multiply that by the average cost of the hardware and the software on those assets, as well as any maintenance costs, you can calculate your savings, your annual savings, simply by increasing utilization, reducing the amount of assets that are in stock. You can correlate that to a reduction in your stock levels, and then map that to specific dollar value savings. This, use whatever utilization or ROI calculator you need, but you can see here if I kind of fiddle with these numbers, which you can do in your spreadsheet here, where I'm currently at 80%. If I get that to 85, I've got a $1.3 million return. And then you can increase your volume and, kind of fiddle with your own numbers to make your own, your own calculations make sense. But by having that trend data and be able to show your average utilization over time, you can turn that into a specific number of hardware assets, average the cost of those assets, and then demonstrate a pretty concrete ROI to your business. So hopefully that makes sense. I've got a question here. I've got some more participants in the polls. Thank you. What's a good utilization number? That's a great question. It's kind of subjective. We feel that that's a subjective answer, and I can't really tell you. We're working with one organization that estimates they're at about a 75% utilization. It's a large enterprise. And they're trying to drive that to 85% utilization. That's not a hard and fast rule. They've just been able to measure their stock dwell times, which I'm going to get into next, and they feel that they're too high. So they know they've got room to increase their utilization. But what is a good utilization number? It really depends. We were setting this 75% target, but now there's like COVID supply chain issues and people can't get laptops. So you got to factor that into the equation. You don't necessarily want to reduce your stock levels to zero when there's issues replenishing supply. So this problem gets kind of infinitely more complex when you think about your lead times, et cetera. So there may be a case where you do need to reduce your utilization, increase your stock levels, because you can't get new computers because the ports in Asia are shut down due to COVID. So there is no hard and fast rule on what utilization is, what the right number is. The important point is that you score it and score your utilization, and then be able to demonstrate the change in utilization over time. Then you can map that internally to specific dollar value savings. So I didn't answer your question. What's a good number? I don't know. But you need to score it and measure it so you can determine and prove to leadership whether you're changing it positively or negatively, and then translate that into dollars. Okay. I'm going to talk about efficiency here. So Victoria said I had more people in my polls here. So we got a strategic person in there. We got a chaotic. Thank you for being honest about that. And then it looks like yeah, on the platform side, ServiceNow is still kind of leading the pack here. 63% gobbling it up over there. We got others. I like to see that. All right, spread it out. All right, cool. All right, now I got to speed up here because I'm slowing down. All right, so now I want to talk about process efficiency. This is about measuring the performance of our asset processes. So what's involved there is clocking, which means timing assets as they move through states in your life cycle, so that you can then score those times and then trend those times. And so I'll explain kind of what I mean here. One of the key process KPIs that I mentioned earlier is stock dwell time. And by controlling your processes, and inserting the appropriate tooling, by controlling processes, you can insert the appropriate time tooling. So this here is an example of what we call a clock definition. Excuse me. You'll see here we've got what we call a hardware state clock, a sub-state clock, and a location clock. I'm using ServiceNow, I'm using Asterisk ServiceNow to do this, but the general concept is that you want to capture the duration of time that an asset sits in a particular state. So asset install status in ServiceNow is how you track on order, in transit, in use, in stock. So by setting up a clock, as the assets shift out of those states, the system will then record the duration of time that the asset dwelled in that state. So that's leaving that historical duration data by state, by asset, that you can then use to trend, so that you can then use to score and trend. So using the same scoring tool, as opposed to calculating the percentage of assets in use, I'm going to calculate the percentage of assets that dwelled in stock less than my target. In this example, I'm saying I want stock to be I want assets to dwell in stock no more than 30 days. I've seen 60 days, I've seen 90 days. If you're about to ask me what's a good stock dwell time, like I said, with COVID, I don't know. You set the target and measure yourself against it. So in this example, we're going to measure percentage of assets that dwell in stock less than 30 days. And just like calculating the percentage of all in-use assets, I'm going to count the number of assets that dwelled in stock less than 30 days over all the assets that were in stock to come up with my percentage score. And then I'm just like I was trending utilization, I can show here on a month-by-month basis what percentage of assets achieve that SLA. Oh, I messed up my header here. This should be 30 days here, but the point is, this is just the title of this chart here. But the point is I can show leadership that we were 92% compliant with our 30-day stock dwell time max. And then we can see that that degraded. And something happened here in August of 2021. Let's blame COVID like we do, but it could be anything: supply chain issues, personnel issues, technology issues. This is shining a light on your asset lifecycle performance, and it shows a dip in which you can translate then into maintenance and tax and insurances. Just like I showed the cost of assets that are not in use, you can attribute stock dwell time and calculate that to amount of insurance and tax and maintenance contracts and warranty that was wasted by those assets not being turned around effectively. So, excuse me. So again, just to kind of review, you've got to control your processes first. You can insert the clocking tools so that you can capture the time duration as assets move through the life cycle. And then surfacing that, this is just one charting tool. We've got seen implementations where customers extract that clock data out to their Tableau or their Apptio, dashboarding tool, and surface that to the business. But the important thing is to have the controlled processes so you can install that tooling to capture that duration data. And here I'm doing a waiting receipt less than 21 days. You can track pending disposal or pending install, pending disposal, in maintenance. It doesn't matter what when you set up your duration clocks and you capture that duration data, you're going to link it to a particular state, and then you can surface that in different reports and dashboards. I'm just drilling into the stock dwell time because, again, it makes perfect sense to me. Like, thinking as like a simple-minded executive. I don't mean to keep picking on executives, but they're busy dealing with other stuff. And like, as a hardware asset manager, you got to try to get their attention. You can sell them on the stock dwell time thing. They don't want things lingering in stock. They can get that. And if you can prove to them that you're turning things over efficiently, you can connect the dots in that executive's head about how hardware asset managers are delivering value. Our processes are streamlined, and I can prove that with this stock dwell time data. That's just one example. You can attribute that to any stage in the asset life cycle. But you got to trust your data. You got to be able to capture that duration information with the appropriate tooling. Last category here, how am I doing on time? 9:24, I got 1 minute, is to measure accuracy of data. So like ServiceNow's got the Ham Pro tool. Asset Track for ServiceNow is another tool for ServiceNow but you can coordinate your audits, schedule those audits, and capture and trend those results over time. Just a couple of important concepts I want to touch on is when you're in order to produce accuracy reports, you need to organize those reports in a sensible way. So the first thing you need to do is define our audits. What are the segments of data, hardware assets that we need to have regularly audited? And so that you can define that definition and then perform those audits repeatedly so that you can trend them over time. And when you define those audits, you want to organize them in a way that can roll up into sensible reports. So just as a simple example here, we've got audit definitions for stock rooms and data centers. You can see I've categorized those. There's a master data center server audit definition, and one of those per data center. There's also one master stockroom audit definition, and then one audit definition per stockroom. This categorization makes sense because then as you perform those audits, You can track those results over time. This is just, for each one of these audit definitions, we're recording the duration and the time, and we're calculating the accuracy scores. This audit, this depot stockroom on this date, the audit lasted this long, and we found 85% of the assets, and we're leaving a trail of those historical accuracy numbers over time. And because I organize the definitions by category, I can then surface those into reports that roll up to an executive or dashboard level. So here I'm aggregating data center audits over time versus stockroom audits over time. So I've got a comment here that I want to do. Remember that ITAM is 80% process and 20% tool. This metric KPI help you report on the key process points that need to be measured with your ITAM process. The tool is there to help provide data to compose the metrics and make the reports to make you successful. That's right. This isn't about the tool. This is about the methodology. I mentioned in the beginning, you've got to control your life cycle processes to make them consistent. Only when you have that process consistent can you insert the tooling to capture the data that you're going to use to calculate these metrics that you can then surface in whatever dashboard. So hopefully that makes sense. My main point here of this audit accuracy is to organize your audits by definition category. Take some good time to define your audit definitions with the end in mind. You want to create a mock-up of your audit accuracy report to begin with, so that you know what information you need to capture and how you want to organize those audit definitions. And then you can do that in whatever tool, which is, I 100% agree, even though I'm a tool vendor, it is more about the process than it is about the tool that you select. So I appreciate that comment that was made there. At the end of the day, I just picked out three KPIs to kind of drill into, to kind of touch on three different types. There's other KPIs. I'm certain others may find other KPIs more important, but they all kind of fit into the same category. I just wanted to take you through some examples of how to think about capturing metrics and how you might surface those to the business. And then, ultimately, kind of the goal here is to be able to pull this into performance dashboards that make it easy to, display a collection of these metrics on a dashboard, so that ultimately you can take your eye off the ball and start focusing on more strategic objectives. If we've got the right tooling in place, we're surfacing the right metrics, and we're measuring those, displaying these metrics against specific performance targets. As long as we keep those performances up above those green lines, we've got all the data behind those to prove it, then you can surface those to the business. You don't have to worry about whether your stock teams or your vendors are performing, because you show it with data automatically. So let's see here. Question: are these tools available in ServiceNow, or do I need ServiceNow HAM Pro? ServiceNow provides the database platform. You can use ServiceNow HAM Pro. You could use as an alternative Asset Track for ServiceNow. You can use ServiceNow HAM Pro with performance analytics to do this stuff. You could also use Asset Track for ServiceNow with Asset Track Scoreboard to accomplish the same things that I've described here. The Asset Track Scoreboard product is lighter weight. It's also less expensive. But anyway, thank you for that question. I think I am up on my time here. I want about 5 minutes over. I want to thank everybody for their time today. If there's any additional questions, please let me know, and feel free to contact me. I'll upload a copy of this presentation to the file upload thingy within Pathable, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or want to talk about this stuff, because I totally enjoy it. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm just going to check one more time on the little chatty chat live meeting something or other. Oh, I don't even know how to use this thing. So if you guys chat to me, Victoria will chat to me, and I will stop looking like an idiot on a live stream. That was recorded. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the ITAM review. I can't wait to see y'all in person. We're getting there. I hope you're all healthy. and happy, and we get to see each other in real 3D at some point here in the near future.